Hi, welcome to this code lab on CodelabsproAI. And in this code lab, we're going to create this CodelabsproAI multi-agent workflow and orchestration framework. So in the multi-agent workflow and orchestration layer, we basically have three key agents. We have our broker agent, which in this case would query stock market prices in real time. We have our research agent that will research geopolitical and economic forces that might have an impact on those stock prices. And our orchestration agent would coordinate between the two and add the relevant weights to decide the future stock price recommendation. So in this example, we might try to calculate the impact of the global trade wars on the stock price of a company like Shopify. So just as a prerequisite, we need to have an OpenAI API key for this in order to follow along with this. So that's one prerequisite. The way to add the OpenAI key to our environment is to export it using the export command. So the command looks something like this, and I'm going to remove that API key as soon as this video is done, because I just showed you the key and that's not ideal. So once you've exported the key, we need to create a virtual environment. Now for this example, I'm going to use UV to create a Python virtual environment. So in my agents folder, I'll go in and create a Python virtual environment using the UV command. And what that does is it creates the .ben folder and creates the virtual environment. So now I can activate that virtual environment. And the prerequisites I need on this virtual environment are the OpenAI package and the Gradio package. So I can go ahead and say UV pip install OpenAI. So that should install the OpenAI package, and then I can install Gradio. So now I have pip install OpenAI and pip install Gradio. Now keep in mind that the difference between this agent and other agents is this one will use OpenAI, but the one that we'll finally deploy is going to have private LLM. So it'll use Gemma 3 as the quantized Gemma 3 as the model. So let me go ahead and freeze the pip packages. So I can just say pip UV pip freeze and then freeze it to the requirements.txt. And if I look at requirements.txt, you see I have these here. So now I can go ahead and create the agent. So in my AgentZero folder, I can just say app.py, and in app.py I can say from OpenAI import OpenAI. I can say import Gradio as gr. So what that's doing is importing the Gradio tools. And now I can import OS. I need a function. Actually, let me first write the main function. So the dunder name dunder equals dunder main dunder. This gives us a way to check if we are in the main package or in the main module of the Python app. And then if you're in the main app, we can just run demo.launch, and I'm going to create the demo function now. So here I can say gr.interface. So this is going to create the Gradio interface. So I can create a function here, and I can call generate response. I haven't declared the generate response function yet, but I can create a placeholder for it right now. So if I say generate response, now the parameters for this are API key and prompt, and I can put a comment here to say I need to create a client with the OpenAI API key. So once I have the client, I can essentially ask for the response using the new responses API. So this is the newest API, which basically replaces chat completions API, which used to be the previously default API. So I'm going to use GPT-4o as the model. I'm going to use I'm going to use let's see which tool can be used. We probably have to look at the documentation to check which tools to use. In this case, I'll probably end up using search preview, or maybe, oh yeah, I can just leave this blank for now because I'm not using search in this example. In the next example I will. So I can take the prompt as an input, and that's my response. I probably need to have the plugin to format this correctly, but for now it's fine. So I can just output the response dot output text, and in the catch block or the exception block, I can say exception as E, and I can return the error or exception as a string literal or an F string, and just convert the exception to an F string as follows. So now I have my generate response function. Now in my interface, I need to create the Gradio interface. So to create the Gradio interface, what I need to do is have a input box. So I'll have a set of input boxes, and the first box would be a text box with placeholder, and it will say OpenAI API key. So this is in case the environment variable is not set. One can enter the API key here, and we'll add a label here. So now we have the label, and we'll also add a blank default in case the environment key is not set, so it comes back as blank. But this input box should be populated if it's blank in the environment. And now we can create the text box for the query. So let's have about 4 lines for the second query text box. And this is going to be our query text box. And we'll have a label called query. So that's for our query. Now we can close the array for the inputs, and we'll create the outputs here. So for our outputs, also in Python generally we don't need these spaces, so we can lint it correctly for Python. So the outputs would be gr.textbox, and let's put lots of lines for the output, and let's put a label on it, and we'll call it response to query. And the title can be set to, we'll call it CodelabsproAI, and in our description we can say orchestration framework for agentic business and finance workflows using private and secure LLMs. Right? So in this case, it's not private because we're using OpenAI, but in the next example, we will use a private AI deployed locally, which would be Gemma 3 in this case. So let's just have some examples here. Let's say predict the stock price of Shopify this summer, taking into account geopolitical factors, geopolitical and global economic factors. So that's one area of research. Then the second example beyond that could be predict the defense spending by European Union members, take into account geopolitical factors. And the third one can be predict the trade between EU and Canada in 2025. Taking into consideration all relevant factors. So this is like a deep research of not just markets but also global geopolitics. And now we have our demo function. So our demo function, demo.launch is what we are calling, and that should run. So we already have our virtual environment running, and we've installed all the requirements in it. The requirements are in the root folder here, and we have our AgentZero here. So in order to run AgentZero, we can just say python app.py. So there seems to be a syntax error on the F string line, so we can just set the line numbers here and debug the F string on. So I'm missing a close curly here, so, and also a typo there. So let's run it again. So now it's running on local, and we can just open this in our browser, and we have our CodelabsproAI orchestration framework. So here I can set the query, so I could basically use the example query that's here, and that populates the example here. So I can just say submit. So it's looking for some factors, and here it's saying I'm unable to predict stock prices. So let's try a different query. Predict the markets in EU and Canada this summer. So let's try that. Okay, so it said predicting market trends involves considerable uncertainty, particularly due to geopolitical and global economic factors. The energy prices, energy challenges could continue to affect industrial costs and inflation. Inflation and monetary policy, the European Central Bank might adjust interest rates to combat inflation, impacting borrowing costs and consumer spending patterns. Trade relations, post-Brexit trade dynamics, and ongoing relations with major partners like US and China will remain crucial. Disruptions or improvements in these relationships could influence market stability. The ongoing situation in Ukraine impacts Eastern European stability and economic performance. Prolonged conflict could lead to sustained market volatility. Green transition, investment in renewable energy and sustainability projects could grow, influenced by EU's climate goals, potentially favoring sectors like green energy and technology. Now it has predictions for Canada. So the conclusion is both the EU and Canadian markets would likely face volatility driven by geopolitical events and internal economic policies. Investors should stay informed about central bank actions and international trade developments, while energy sectors related to renewable energy and technology may pose increased opportunities given global sustainability trends. So one more quick improvement we can just make to our AgentZero is to reduce the lines here on our output box. I reduced it to 20, and let's run that again. So I'll just refresh this, and now we have a much better UI. So again, we could query something like defense spending and hit submit. Okay, so we came back with a response about defense spending by EU, and that's the first part in this series on creating the CodelabsproAI agent, or the orchestration agent, including the broker agent and the research agent. So in the next part, we'll continue to build on this. Thanks for watching. See you in part 2. Thanks.